And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge. I'm Anthony Irwin, joined today by a real friend of the show, a legitimate friend in real life, one of the most talented people that works in this industry, and somebody who hopefully's internet connection works this time. Sabrina Merchant of The Athletic, thank you very much for hopping on. And how you doing? How you holding up?
Just imagine how good I could be at this job if I had successful internet all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes a mechanic is only as good as their tools, and if your internet isn't great, then that does kind of set you back a little bit. I want to start this conversation as Callie chimes in from outside. I want to start this conversation by wondering, genuinely wondering how nice it is to just be able to walk away when the Lakers piss you off. Like, is it just the delight of your life that like you could just turn off a Laker game if you feel like it, ignore one completely?
So you do a lot of all access with Raj, right? He is constantly texting me during Laker games, asking about specific decisions, like why did Ham do this? Do you think we should have been playing zone here? Like what was the coverage here? And 80% of the time I have to be like, Raj, I'm not watching. Like, it's already gotten too bad.
Do you try to watch every game still, or do you like find yourself like, that matchup? This is a letdown game. It's just going to
the
annoy
home
me.
games I tend to watch because otherwise, if they're like 5 o'clock starts on Pacific time, then there's probably another college game that I'm watching at the time. But most of the time, there aren't college games at like 7:30 that I'm interested in. So I would say I attempt to watch half of the Laker games live, and how many of those I finish is a different story. Sometimes I go back and rewatch. Like, fun fact, I actually did rewatch the entire Lakers Warriors game, and Raj was texting me the whole time as I was rewatching it.
Okay,
Knew exactly what was happening.
Did you get here? Did you? That's so perfect.
That was a really fun experience, actually. But yeah, I had higher expectations for this season, and I'm still confused as to all what went down. I do have a couple questions for you, actually, given that you've been just locked into everything that's been happening. I'm just more confused than anything as to what has transpired over the last few months.
Well, hopefully I'll be able to clear that up. And that is a fun exercise that we can conduct, or an experiment that we can conduct. You asking me questions and me trying to inform you on stuff. I don't.
Should we just do that now? Actually, I think that's going to inform a lot of what comes later.
I wanted to say it's great that you mentioned. Excuse me. It's great that you mentioned Raj, because your guys' show previously was I Love Basketball, which then I believe became I Loathe Basketball because of the way that season went.
The 21-22 season, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to kind of bring some of that branding back for this episode. And a part of what made that 21-22 season so frustrating was like how predictable every kind of rest stop was, and every gas station that you hit along that really long car ride with like an annoying little brother who's just like pestering and pestering. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Like, we are currently on that car ride right now, stuck in this car for the next 27 hours or whatever it is. And we have reached the portion of that car ride which features the subtweet. He's back. The subtweet is back. Like we have reached it. It has happened. He tweeted an hourglass last night.
I'm not gonna lie, that was very funny.
He is we've even had Dave McMenamin quote tweet him with the potential meanings of the hourglass. Not listed was that potentially like he just saw a picture of his wife, right? And like that to me is like when I see Jen, I'm like, hey, hourglass tweet, sweet. And but like no, it was just the various frustrations that could be going on and running across his mind in that moment. This morning he did tweet out that he is now a DraftKings partner, so maybe he was just counting down the seconds or the grains of sand in that hourglass to be able to make that announcement formally. But somehow I don't think that's what it was. I somehow I think it was a nice and quick reminder to those in charge of the Lakers, hey guys, I'm going to be 40 next year. Like,
This year,
everybody,
actually.
yeah, right. Yeah, this year, next season. I mean, like, I'm going to be
Yeah.
playing basketball at hopefully a really high level again when I am 40 years old. Can we please stop effing around here? So was that like, again, genuinely asking you this? When something like that happens, how nice is it to just be like, ha, those idiots, and then just walk away?
I wish I could say I was enjoying the Laker fan experience a little bit more, without having to be super invested in it, but nothing about this is enjoyable. Even getting to step away, like that's not why I'm in, the fandom experience, right? Like I'm a Laker fan because it's been a part of my life for my entire existence, right? Like I would like to have more positive associations with this team. And just because, sure, I'm not bound to watch the entirety of a just desultory game against the Atlanta Hawks, it doesn't make it any more pleasant. Like I would like to have this more, again, positive thing in my life that's missing and has been missing since December 7th, the final of the in-season tournament. But yeah, I'd say it's probably like more emotionally healthy to step away. But I do kind of, miss all of the little ins and outs that I was like just a sicko about getting into. But um, no, nothing about this is enjoyable. Like the fact that I can step away is, it just means that like there's a bad product on the floor. Like that's all that it means.
Yeah, right. It's like, it's not, yeah. Usually when you make that choice to step away, it's generally to like preserve your mental health and stuff.
Mhm.
And that generally doesn't mean that your favorite team is doing very well. And you know what this latest subtweet made me miss? Like really actually miss was the good old days at Silver Screen and Roll where like our Slack would light up and we would just riff for like a good hour or two about it
Mhm.
back in its heyday. And no, now that we have all kind of gone our separate ways, I'm left to just kind of experience that on my own. And I'll text Harrison and I'll laugh with him about it, and maybe we'll drop it in the Lakers Lounge Slack, and we'll joke about it there. Or I'll get texts about it from a variety of various people who I've been
From your
talking to all
sources.
season.
Yes.
Well, yeah, from the army of people willing to dump on the Lakers this year. Like it's just a very different experience. And it was funny. Last night I recorded a show in which I said that I thought that firing Darvin Ham could legitimately turn the season around just like that, right?
Yeah, I
It's like
listened to that
trading
this
Russell
morning.
Westbrook. Yeah, trading Russell Westbrook turned that season around because it was just a very clear, there was like a single malady that everything can kind of be charted back to, not specifically Russell Westbrook the player or let alone the person, but the contract and the
Mhm.
bad fit and all of those things. And I think we are reaching that point, or we have reached that point there with Darvin. And usually when I say something extreme like that, people close to the Lakers will reach out like, come on, man, like, can you just tone it down a little bit, But no, instead, since I said that, I've had like a few texts be like, yeah, we all think so too. We're all waiting too. So yeah, I would say see, Sabrina, it is probably, I would love to be afforded the luxury of just stepping away occasionally, as you have been able to preserve my mental health, because the last time some people watching saw me, I was wearing Joker makeup.
Yeah, did your wife do that? I didn't actually get the whole story behind it.
It was Jen participated. She
Okay.
was in charge of the hair, and
Okay.
then we had some company in excuse me, over the weekend, and it was my daughter's godmother who did that,
Okay.
the face and all of that stuff. And my
It was very
eye
well done.
still
Yeah.
has not, yeah,
Yeah, you
she
did
did a
mention
great
that.
job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my eye is not recovered still. I think I have like some like particles of flour stuck in my eye permanently now. And but it's all worth it. It is
It's all
all
in
worth it
service of the
to
bit. Yeah.
exactly. But I wanted to ask you though about Darvin, and if you think that firing him could have that same impact that trading Russell Westbrook did last year.
So first of all, I'm of the belief that in general coaches matter a lot less than we think they do. Uh,
Yeah.
but I do think that, locker room vibes are just such a tricky balance and a very specific ecosystem that needs to be cultivated. Like everybody has to be in the right mood to perform their best. So if there's somebody that they genuinely dislike, I can see how that would cause difficulties for everyone to, play at their optimum level. I'm just so confused as to how we got to this point because last season,
Yeah.
we're commending Darvin for holding the locker room together for the first 2/3 of the season and for going to Russ and getting him to come off the bench, which is, the only bullet that he has left, right, in terms of this roster. Like, let's try to stagger Russ and LeBron as much as possible, see if that works. And it doesn't work, but like at least he got the buy-in to be able to do that. I thought that was significant that he got the buy-in to be able to, get Russ to come off the bench.
Yeah.
Then, of course, like they make the trades. The first lineup with Beasley, as the two is doing fine, but then he makes the decision to, to move Austin into the starting lineup. The Lakers really roll after that, pushes a lot of the right buttons in the playoffs in terms of how he optimizes Rui and Dennis Schroeder. The Denver series obviously wasn't a shining example on Darvin's resume, but first time in the conference finals, I don't think it was necessarily his fault that the Lakers lost. I
Yeah. They
think
only
Denver
had
was just
4
better.
guys.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Denver was just better. So I thought, the way he performed in his rookie season, I think that's like literally the 99th percentile of what you can expect from a rookie head coach in terms of what he had to deal with and how he, took the tools at his disposal. I realize saying that there's been like multiple rookie head coaches that have won titles in the last decade, but let's ignore that for a second. They had better
Yeah.
rosters than what the Lakers are working with. So we come into this season, he makes a decision to start Prince. At this point, I'm kind of just of the belief that they must have promised Prince a starting spot when they signed him to the biannual. Like, this is the only way I can get around it. Uh,
Yeah.
why they needed to promise him a starting spot to sign him to the biannual is beyond me. Like, maybe you just promise that if he's agreeing to a minimum, but this is like 2 times that money. Whatever. That's not the point of this
I've been told
tiebreak
that
here.
isn't the case, but I don't know what it would look like otherwise.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
like the people who have spoken the most definitively about it have said no, that isn't the case. This is just Darvin's decision. But there are people in the organization who are sitting there like, I mean,
What?
what else could be going on? Your guess is as good as mine, apparently.
Even so, the idea of starting Torian at the start of the season made sense because Vando
Fine.
was hurt, and you're not going to put Cam Reddish into that position right away. Rui's not actually a 3, I don't think.
Yeah.
The wing defense, I understand the logic of putting Torian Prince in the starting lineup. Very clearly, he realizes that lineup doesn't, performing as well as the Lakers wanted to, puts Cam Reddish in. I understand you need to keep D'Lo in the starting lineup to optimize his trade value. Like, Cam is a worthy flyer in terms of getting a longer defender. Like, all of these things I can get to logically, right?
Right.
I'm not sure that they were the exact decisions I would have made, but the Lakers go on that run. They win the in-season tournament title. They play very well in all those games. And this is where my first question to you comes, Anthony. You were reporting that there was discontent in the locker room even as they were playing this well. How do we get there? Like, what arrived, like, how did we get to that moment where the Lakers are playing well? You'd
Mhm.
think they're obviously Darvin and Austin have. Well, that's my second question. But how do we get to the point where, like, even when the Lakers are playing well, that they don't
Yeah.
trust their coach?
So I still go back to the starting point being that that core 6 guys from last year has not felt like they have gotten proper opportunity to make it work together.
But
It's
at
not
that
that they
point,
don't
like,
like Torian.
Vando was mostly hurt. Rui had been
Yeah.
going with the concussion, the eye injury. Like, it's not even like they had a chance to play those guys.
Well, and but you also had D'Lo stay in the lineup, and it was Austin who was told to take a seat, right? And that
He's
was
closing
kind
games
of.
though, right?
He was, yeah, but it's just it and I think that especially with how close D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves are, I think they were kind of taken aback by how quickly they moved away from them as a combination. And I think that we have seen recently when they got back into the starting lineup, that kind of light come back to them a little bit. Unfortunately, they're also
Playing with
playing with
Prince, yeah.
Torian Prince, and there isn't like a, great perimeter defender among the 3 of them. And
Mhm.
the defense has really suffered since. But I really think that was kind of the starting point there. And one consistent criticism that I hear levied by people close to the situation is that Darvin is, for lack of a better term, very closed-minded about the type of role players that he wants. And he tries to fit and pigeonhole players into those roles, even if they aren't that kind of a player. And how he decides on those roles and what he asks of those people in those roles is different player by player and situation by situation. But for whatever reason this year, you've had guys slotted into these spots that they just don't feel like they are equipped to fill those roles, and then it's held against them when they aren't filling those roles. And I just think the communication I've heard all year has not been where it needs to be, from Darvin to role players. I'm not saying that you gotta, open door policies is not really a thing in the NBA. But you do have to make yourself somewhat available, especially for the guys who helped get you to the Western Conference Finals. And and yeah, it's just like it's a combination of all of these things. And the way that I put it last night is essentially it feels to some of these guys like they work for a manager whose dad is the boss or mom is the boss, and there is no accountability above them, and it's always on them when the Lakers fall short. The blame falls on the players and never on the manager, and or in this case the coach. And I think that's just not a very healthy way for all of this to exist. You called it an ecosystem. The locker room is this living, breathing thing. It's a chemistry set that at any moment you can have a pipe burst, and now everything kind of goes haywire. And earlier this season I kind of stepped on it a little bit with some of my phrasing as it pertained to Austin. I don't think I stepped on it. I think it was kind of aggregated poorly. But regardless, about Austin and Darvin and how, uh, there are people still in the organization who are just like, what is going on there? And I think there are people who feel that way about Rui now, and there are people who feel that way about Vanderbilt now. And it goes back to what you talked about with Torian, where it's like there has to be a promise. Otherwise, why are we relying on a lesser player here to the extent
Mhm.
that we are?
Yeah. And I think one thing that I constantly forget is that just because so much of the same people exist from last year's team, like no NBA team is the same.
Hmm.
Even though Darvin had the experience with, those core six last year and Max, the fact that they all came back doesn't mean that their relationship with Darvin stays the same. And that was kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. Like, I feel like I hear analysts say this a lot, where just like, even if you have the same roster coming back from year to year, it's just not the same team. Like, people are at different stages in
Yeah.
their lives, they're different stages in their careers. They have different, goals and just general being. And I, the idea of continuity makes more sense in theory than it does in practice, because you're just never going to get those same players at the same exact stages of themselves from year to year.
Yep.
Um, so,
Guys get paid.
yeah,
Guys are
exactly.
hoping to get paid. Yeah.
But it is strange to me that someone who I think one of his best attributes was how well he communicated with his team last year, and how well he seemingly, pulled the levers of the role players, like how he used Troy Brown, how he used like Malik Beasley and Austin Reeves, and just everything in that roster last year. It doesn't make sense to me that that would just no longer be a skill set of Darvin. Like, that's literally the reason why he was hired. It was not because we thought he was some grand X's and O's magician. Like, that's not
Yeah.
what the the thought process was when he came in. It was, he is the guy who can command a locker room, who will earn their respect. He's been in the league. He's played against LeBron, like 35% of NBA players have at this point.
It's
Um,
crazy.
and he will be able to like develop relationships with them. And I think that was the through line of last season, even as, we suffered through the Patrick Beverly at the three and all of that nonsense for the first 2/3 of the season. It was, oh, like these guys are still listening to Darvin. Like, the roster makes no sense, but at least there is that relationship, that communication. And I'm so confused as to how that just slipped away. Like, how did Darvin decide, oh, I'm untouchable. Like, I don't have to interact with these guys anymore.
Well, that's the part that Raj keeps asking about, is how is it that this guy feels so comfortable? And I mean, listen to the guy. I joked with Harrison, either on the air or in DMs back and forth or whatever, during the Lakers media day, and how comfortable Darvin looked up there, and how like he just had this glow to him that was like second year head coach who feels comfortable glow, and I do think that some of that went to his head, and that is kind of how this goes, right? It doesn't usually, when communication breaks off, and you see it like this kind of volatile, where like people, you could find any number of clips that you want to find on Twitter nowadays of guys reacting and kind of rolling their eyes at Darvin when he's coaching them. I have been told by people, obviously, who get to go to more Lakers games there, that like you watch any timeout right now, and it's never five guys on, that he is talking to who are about to go back into the game. It's like a couple guys, and then somebody else is over there talking to somebody else, or somebody is like one of those three guys that's there, but they're kind of like looking off into the distance as well. You don't reach it being this visibly broken without kind of a foundational change from one of the parties. And I really think that with the amount of trust and the amount of confidence that he feels from Rob and from Jeanie, whatever the reasons behind those things might be, he has like legitimately kind of changed as a head coach. And yeah, like this is a funny, kind of a stupid example, but did you watch D2, the Mighty Ducks D2 movie?
Yeah,
Remember when like Gordon Bombay goes from like lovable kind of
to
like
slicked back hair and
yeah, like all
suits.
those things, yeah, and they start calling him sellout, and they start
Yeah.
saying how he's like dating the head
Iceland
coach of the
someone.
yeah
Yeah.
like
It's
the
like their
enemy,
trainer or
right?
something. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Like it's a terrible and dated comparison, but that's really kind of what this kind of feels like from like the way that it's been painted. And this guy who was like had a strong suit, was his best at this thing, has moved completely away from it. And I think, if we were 20 games ago, you know, and before that, it could have been resuscitated had he focused on that communication. But like you saw yesterday when Christian Wood meant to quote tweet somebody.
I think I'm in the minority. I actually believe he meant to quote tweet somebody.
Well, no, he meant to quote tweet the Lakers, like the
Starting
official
lineup,
Lakers
yeah.
account when they, yeah. But like but when you see that, and when you see, in the reporting that Shams and Jovan did for your employer, for The Athletic, there was 6 sources were willing to come out and say those things. And by the way, those are the ones that were willing to be like, okay, but like anonymously, right? That means that there were plenty of sources even beyond that who like were like, well,
Just on background,
you
yeah.
seem like you have enough, yeah.
Yeah.
And so like when you have that large a contingent of people who were pissed off in your locker room or in your organization or close to your organization, that means that you have failed as a communicator, to me. And I think that's really kind of where the foundation to this Lakers season has begun its erosion. And now we're at a point now where, it's one of those glamorous mansions that you see off of PCH that's hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, I think the quotes that keep coming out after games where guys are just talking about how they don't know what they're doing on defense, and they're. I think Austin has been the most charitable, honestly, which is weird considering I think
It's
he's
funny,
probably
yeah.
the one who's most pissed off at Darvin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even after that win against Golden State, it was so much of, yeah, we like our 5, we know what this 5 can do, we have familiarity with this 5, and you'd think a guy who was at all tuned into his players would be like, "Hey, let's try that lineup once," like maybe start Vando today, like give Torian
Yeah.
the night off. He's in his 30s. I don't know how old he's 28 maybe. Like it's 82 games is a lot. He's not going to get
Yeah.
to 82. He's already
He
missed
has
a game because of
started more
injury.
games this season than he has started his entire career to this point.
I just keep thinking back to when the Lakers signed Wes Matthews on the biannual a couple years back, and
Yeah.
I had assumed that they would have to offer him a pretty big role, to take that contract because he was, a max contract player, like 2 years before that. And Frank
Yeah.
Vogel still had the audacity to bench him for Taylor Horton-Tucker at portions of that season. And I don't think that was the wrong move. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
you can do these things as a head coach, right? Like,
Yeah.
Taurean Prince is not going to badmouth the rest of the league saying Rob Pelinka promised me a bigger role, and now they're starting Jared
Yeah.
Vanderbilt. Like, people would think you're a
Eventually they
competent
benched
organization
Drummond.
if you do that.
Yeah. Like, so like, because remember they brought in Drummond
Mhm.
as a buyout candidate, and the promise there
Because
was
they
that he
promised
was
him a
going
starter,
to
yeah.
start, and he didn't like it, but he does kind of look back on that moment, and he has talked about it and said, like, yeah, that's kind of when I had to that was my come to Jesus moment, where it's like, all right, this is the kind of player I am now. I'm a minimum type player, I guess. And yeah, I just, the way that all this has played out is really fascinating. And um we're here in trade rumor season, where every day it's some new update that is just the same update with different words
Yep.
about what the Lakers are thinking about doing. And so for those of you who keep asking, and I don't begrudge you for asking, what's the update with the Lakers and what's the update with Murray? No update. They're still waiting for the Hawks to not demand Austin Reeves in the trade. I will say though that, and this is just speculation on my part, I will say though that this is the first day after that, like, LeBron hourglass tweet. This is the first day that I've thought it's possible that Austin gets traded for DeJounte Murray. Not that he actually gets traded for
Sure.
him, or anything like that. I haven't checked in on it or whatever. I don't think the Lakers' stance has actually changed. But this is the first time where I'm like, oh, like LeBron's like done. Okay. And by the way, I like Austin. I really think that he's been used incorrectly all season this year, and I think he's a better player than he actually is. But like, I do think the Lakers could probably come off of their stance on him just a little bit. Maybe not specifically for Murray, but teams around the league are just like, yeah, you start a conversation and you mention Austin and they hang up the phone. Not literally, but they're I don't think Rob is that kind of rude, but it is kind of like, yeah, they just move off of it. They say Austin's not going to be moved, and unless you're going to trade one of your untouchables, we are not moving one of ours.
Mhm.
I don't think Austin should necessarily be held in that regard, but regardless, um, as we are in this portion of the season, I find it personally difficult to separate what the Lakers could potentially do from a head coach that has lost the locker room. And like, again, I'm asking, like, from your vantage point, from what you have seen this year, um, how would you handle the situation? Do you risk this being a lost season and risk LeBron walking away for like, not just a replaceable head coach, but like what seems to be an outright bad one right now?
Yeah. So I don't know how to judge Darvin Ham as a head coach in totality because, like I said, I thought his first year was pretty damn good, and I still think that should carry some weight. But
Mhm.
when you're in the LeBron James business, especially if he's 39 years old, I don't think fair is really the apt word for why you make decisions. You make decisions because you're trying to optimize LeBron James, and if he's going to play harder against another head coach, like, I think I'm at the point where, yeah, why not? Like, I'm sure
Yeah.
Darvin is on a 4-year deal, right? I think
Mhm.
Frank Vogel, you're probably not paying anymore because if you had any more money on his deal, it's offset by Phoenix. So just suck it up. Like, he's 39 years old, and Anthony Davis is playing the best I've ever seen out of him.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of with you. Like, I really hate to do things this dramatic, but I think you just let it ride. Let Darvin go, see what Phil Handy can do. Um, at the very least, LeBron just sort of does his player coach thing. But yeah, I'm kind of at the point where, like, it is so ugly to watch the Laker games. Like, they just seem so disinterested. And it's a
Yeah.
different kind of ugly than it was last year because, like, LeBron again, I'm not saying this to diminish Russ as a person. He seemed to hate playing with Russ, but
Yeah.
there was like everything else, at least guys were like trying. Like there were a lot of minimum guys who were trying, and
Yeah.
and it was like all minimum guys plus those three, right? But I don't feel like anybody is really trying that hard on this year's team. Like Anthony Davis plays hard, right? Because that's
Yeah.
his.
He always is going to.
He's always going to play hard, even to the point where like he gets nicked up because he's trying too hard. But I just don't feel that same sort of collective responsibility from players on the team like I did last year. Like it's just so frustrating to watch. And I don't know how it went so badly all of a sudden. Like I'm a Kings fan too, the LA Kings, and they have lost 14 of their last 16 games. And it's just been a terrible month for the teams that I watch. I cannot get over how
Spring
poorly
training
things
is
have
right around the
gone
corner.
so quickly. Like the
Yeah.
Kings were just boat racing to start the season, like beating Vegas,
Yeah.
beating Vancouver. Like it was a wonderful start. And now, like, it's amazing how quickly things can change. But I do think you have to respond when your window is as small as a 39-year-old LeBron James.
Yeah, that's the part that, like, even because I saw that Kevin O'Connor wrote the Ringers like annual the Lakers and LeBron need to split column. Like that happens like every year or whatever.
I thought it was a good column.
I think no, I I think every year that they write it, they bring up valid points because like look, you look at Rob Pelinka and Jeanie Buss have had LeBron and AD on their team for this is their 5th year together,
Yeah.
right? So it's 4.5 years. And
Barely
their
above 500.
record is like barely above 500 in the regular season. And now, like,
that's insane.
In there somewhere also is the title and the Western Conference Finals run. But like those things to me make the regular season record all the more frustrating because that's what happens when you supply LeBron and AD a sensible environment in which to work, And also, by the way, that championship that happened, that was a lot of guys that were like pre-Rob Pelinka, like Alex Caruso, pre-Rob Pelinka,
Right.
Kyle Kuzma, pre-Rob Pelinka, KCP, if not like at the exact same time. I think
KCP is a Rob
before.
Pelinka guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
but like
Pelinka came in February of 17 and KCP signed that offseason. So he's a Pelinka guy.
Yeah. So, but like there were parts of that team that like were not, were not his ideas or whatever.
And to think I wasn't a big fan of that team when it was originally assembled, but it worked out pretty well.
My favorite, like, it's so funny. Like we are so like far removed from that team that I see those guys, whether it's KCP or Caruso or Kuz, and I see them doing what they're doing around the league, and I'm just like, we gave up them and stuff. It was like, it wasn't like a straight swap. It wasn't, selling pieces to get ready for a rebuild. No, it was retooling, and we gave up those guys and stuff.
I've sort of forgiven the Russell Westbrook trade at this point, just because like LA stars, whatever. I can never get over the Caruso part of it. It's just money.
No.
Just money.
Yeah. But so the last kind of thing I wanted to talk to you about before we move on to you mentioned like you made me sad with like your favorite teams this month or whatever. It's also NECA like it's gone.
Oh yeah,
also.
leaving the Sparks, right?
Yeah.
That's a thing. Yeah.
So we'll get a Sparks and WNBA update here in a second. But the last thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about is like, I know a lot of the focus right now is on Darvin Ham, and rightfully so, right? I've charted every step along this path. It has not been a fun path to walk.
No, doesn't seem like it.
But, no, my shoes are all frayed. I have like a freaking alligator chasing me. It's just not. It hasn't been a fun hike. But I think the person who is somehow once again kind of sliding by under the radar when a lot of the blame should be placed on this person is Rob Pelinka. I don't know how we aren't talking about the fact that he didn't sign a single two-way player this last offseason. Hasn't rung in his head coach to make him utilize the players who I thought were talented enough to be two-way players. Hasn't worked apparently with the head coach to make sure that they are used more properly. Might be on the verge of firing his third head coach in 5 years. Has overhauled roster because Luke Walton also.
Right.
Yeah. So Luke, Frank, and now it could be potentially Ham. I just, at what point do we start, blaming the pawns on or the pieces on the chessboard, when in reality the person setting the culture up top is probably the thing where this thing keeps getting derailed the most often.
I mean, I'm not going to argue here. Like, I don't think Rob Pelinka is an above average GM. Obviously, he gets credit for building the title team. I will always go to bat for the 2020-21 Lakers. I think that team was tremendously fun to watch, just got hurt at the wrong time.
Shouts to Marc Gasol, who just retired, by the way.
Marc Gasol, the only guy I can remember having a revenge game against two teams at the same time, when the Lakers put him in the starting lineup against the Toronto Raptors because Andre Drummond was sick that night. It was just a tour de force for Marc Gasol. Really loved his Laker tenure. I'm sorry it didn't go better for him. But
the Lakers mistreating Gasols, that is a tried and true policy.
In fairness, Pau seems to have gotten over it. He's very loving towards the Lakers.
Yeah.
I think we did enough good things for Pau's career. I think we did enough good things. But yeah, we've had this discussion offline where, I think the continuity thing is kind of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, the Lakers brought back, a lot of the pieces of a team that made the Western Conference Finals. On the other hand, I think it was pretty clear that they weren't as good as the NBA champions and they needed to get better. So when you're Rob Pelinka and you're spending the entire offseason saying like, we're just going to build on this team, like clearly we just need more time, don't you think it would be in your best interest to like tell your coach like, hey, let's execute the party?
Make sure that email goes like, you cannot have that email bounce back to you. You can't.
And like, I don't entirely blame him for not signing any two-way players this offseason, because who was legitimately available in the Lakers price range? Like he tried to with Gabe Vincent. Unfortunately, the Heat culture thing, like it's just very hard for those guys to produce outside of Miami, unless you're Max Strus, I guess. But like, I think we would say that he did a good job getting Rui back on that number, getting D'Lo back on that number, getting Austin back. Like I didn't have a problem with any of these. I mean, it's all like, would you rather have Gabe Vincent or financial flexibility, right? And I think in the moment it was reasonable to suggest that Gabe Vincent would be better, but obviously it has not worked out that way. So I just think that when you're Pelinka and your whole thesis was, we're going to improve upon our team with the benefits of time and continuity, you just have to make sure that you're actually doing it. And you can't just sit back and say like, we 100% support Darvin, even though he's apparently on an entirely different page than you are. Like, I don't get that. Yeah. And at a certain point, like the reason the Lakers don't have any of this flexibility is because you keep messing up, like trying to make up for the mistakes that you made previously, right? Like the reason the Lakers don't want to give up an extra first round pick to dump salaries, because, they don't really have extra first round picks to dump because of salary, right? It's just the one. It's just the 2029 pick at this point, until we get to the offseason. So I don't think Pelinka has been like aces at his job since he got it in 2017, right? Like even the summer that they signed LeBron, they created a team that didn't make the playoffs. Like that's obscene. How do you do that? It's one thing for 39-year-old LeBron to be barreling towards a lottery season. It's another thing for 34-year-old LeBron to miss the playoffs. So I don't know. I haven't thought that Rob Pelinka was the right guy for this job in a very long time. There's no way Jeanie fires him though. Like I can't imagine how she does it.
Yeah.
How do we extricate ourselves from this situation? I'm not sure.
This is the part of the process in general with the Lakers that has driven me insane is, so you hire Magic Johnson and you would think you would want to set him up with somebody with a ton of NBA experience to kind of like walk him through some of the more boring parts of the job that you do still have to fulfill in order to be good at what you're doing, right? Instead, she pairs him with Rob Pelinka, who has just as much NBA experience in this role, as Magic does. And you can say, well, we have all of that in house already, right? With somebody like Bill Burka and um
How old is Bill Burka at this point? That's a lot to put on his plate.
he's like 96.
That's not fair to Bill Burka.
Yeah. You have Kurt Rambis apparently, whose
The
NBA
shadow
experience is
GM
something
of
that can be
Fundays.
utilized, right? Yeah. And all right, so you made that mistake once,
Mhm.
right? Having somebody that inexperienced and not pairing that person with experience to learn on the job, how do you make that again with your head coach? How do you do that? Where you go from, all right, you go from Frank Vogel, experienced head coach who won you a championship, fire that guy, sabotage him with a really bad roster, fire him minutes after a season ends, and kind of sort of embarrass him on his way out. Before that, you gave him an extension that wasn't really an extension. That's why they aren't paying his money right now. And then, on top of that, or after that, you bring in Darvin Ham. Where's the NBA head coaching experience on his staff?
Yeah, at least with Frank, you had like Fizdale and who was
Isdale and
Lionel Hollins, I think was there at some
mhm,
point.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
Jason
but
Kidd
that
was a
was
good, former head coach.
yeah,
I'm not saying he was a good former head coach, but like obviously
a former
players
head
around the
coach.
league still ride for Jason
Yeah,
Kidd. Some of them, yeah.
yeah, and no, on this staff you don't have that. And I really think like when you talk about some of the communication breakdowns, an experienced head coach would have pulled Darvin aside and been like, "Hey, you're going to talk to them about like the different roles that you have them playing every night, right? Like you're gonna you're gonna pull. You can open your door occasionally when like Austin Reeves is knocking on it, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't just like hide under your desk every time Christian Wood is like, "Hey man, like hello." Um so like I just so as much as we talk about we mentioned Rob Pelinka, but I also think a lot of this blame falls back on Jeanie
Mhm.
and the way that, and when it comes to professional sports, a lot of times it's as simple as look at the owner. What's up with the owner? What's the process that goes into the decisions that they make, and that is going to have a trickle down effect on the rest of the organization. And I haven't seen Jeanie make a decision with good process that I have like respected yet. Right? It hasn't happened. There was no interview process with Magic. There was no interview process to replace Magic. There was, and there was no interview process with Rob. And even if they fire Rob, who's to say they don't just like, all right, well, Kurt, you get your chance now, you know?
Yeah.
And so like this is why, like, at the end of the day, there are people in the organization who are like kind of biding their time, hoping that Jesse and Joey get a shot at it because they see what Jeanie's process has been when she has her fingers at all involved in the minutia of the basketball stuff. They would kind of like to see her detached from any basketball activity whatsoever and let
Mhm.
Jesse and Joey start doing those things because um they have utilized good process in running the G League Lakers, the South Bay Lakers.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of where this is probably heading sooner than I think people realize. I don't think Jeanie would under any circumstances sell. I don't think the Buss family is getting ready to sell. But if things keep like heading down this path, I do think eventually we're gonna start hearing more about Jesse and Joey and the role that they're playing. That's already started. That started last summer.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that noise is gonna keep getting louder and louder and louder.
I mean, I hope you're right because I think we have enough evidence to show that Jeannie's faith in Rob Pelinka isn't exactly warranted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say so. All right, let's move on though to the WNBA.
My other disappointing favorite team.
You host the Athletic Women's Basketball Show. For the Athletic, you do great work for the Athletic. You also Harrison is no longer included in our group text anymore because you break news, I break news. He does not.
It's not,
Um,
no.
he
Just
has
a
not.
random ass
He,
blogger of Harrison Fagan.
yeah, freaking blog boy over there. But yeah, so I have a few questions about the WNBA, about the Sparks, and about college basketball.
Mhm.
I'll start with the WNBA because the most pressing news is that Sabrina Ionescu. Is that how you say
Ionescu.
your name? Ionescu. Is going to be competing against Steph in the All-Star or for All-Star weekend.
Mhm.
She said that she's down to shoot from the men's 3-point line. I
Mhm.
don't think that's necessarily necessary, but whatever.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
Um, but I think that's a really, really important step here to like, finally actually merge the WNBA and the NBA, right? Where like you have players who will support it. And I think it's great when NBA players really support it and get behind it and stuff like that. But that is one of the NBA's biggest stages. And Sabrina is one of the WNBA's biggest stars. And you could make an argument that Steph, other than LeBron, is the NBA's biggest star. They keep going back and forth in that respect.
Mhm.
And putting her on that platform and giving her that opportunity, or her earning that opportunity, I think is really great, no matter the outcome of whatever, who wins the thing or whatever. I would put a solid bet on Sabrina in that one, depending on the odds. But like, yeah, I think it's a really cool step that the NBA and the WNBA are taking it together. What was kind of the reaction that you saw from your vantage point?
So I am just an NBA All-Star diehard. I love it. I love
Me
all
too.
of the little minutia. I loved just the little stupid events that they try out all the time. Like, when they did that skills challenge with like 3 guys throwing the ball at 3 different targets a couple years ago. Like, I loved all of it.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of the NBA's Shooting Stars competition. I don't know if you remember that. It was when they had an NBA
Yeah.
player, a retired player, and a WNBA player shooting from like
Yep.
6 different spots on the
Missed that.
half court. And then they made it 4 spots, which put undue emphasis on the half court shot, which was just like, Chris Bosh, you can win this every single time because Chris Bosh shoots a better half court shot than
Somehow.
anybody I've ever seen. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Long live Chris Bosh. Love him. So I always loved that event because unlike when you put WNBA players in the celebrity game, where there it's a lose-lose proposition. Either you show up randos who don't know how to play basketball, or you look like you can't play basketball against randos who don't know how to play basketball. Because why would you try in a celebrity game? It's not cool to try in a celebrity game.
Yeah.
I like the Shooting Stars because you're on an equal playing field, right? Like you're just taking the same jump shots everybody else is. And so that's what I really like about this event is it's, marquee event on Saturday, right? I think the 3-point contest is arguably outshined the dunk contest on a number of occasions in recent years.
Yeah. Because guys
And
actually do it.
right, right. The main guys actually do it, right? Like Dame Lillard won last
Yeah.
year. Stephen Curry has done it 7 times. So I'm a big fan of putting them on the same stage. I do think there's going to be some like, oh, but Sabrina's not shooting from the same line and Sabrina's not using the same ball. It's not really the same thing, which is so stupid to me. Like, yes, women's hands are smaller than men's hands. They use a smaller ball. It's okay.
Yeah.
I do wish that we could have gotten this during WNBA All-Star Weekend because
Mm.
Sabrina's not in season, right? Like Steph has been working out every day, like he's in peak form. I think personally, I would just think that he's like better suited to be shooting 43 pointers off of a rack than Sabrina is in the middle of February. But I still think it's very cool that they're doing this on the NBA's big showcase. The fact that Steph has obviously been trying to promote this since July, like when Sabrina had that ridiculous showing, I think. So 40 is the wrong number, but like there's 27 shots that they take and she made 25 of them, which is ridiculous. So I think generally it's going to be very positive. I hope she does well because obviously like there's a lot riding on this in terms of she has to put up a good performance.
Yeah.
The thing is, she's only done 1 3-point shootout in WNBA history, and like obviously that turned out very well. But like, here's a guy who's shot off a rack like 7 times in front of this crowd. Like, I'm a little concerned about what that experience factor looks like. But I have high hopes. I think the response has generally been like, "Oh, how fun! Like we get to watch the best shooters against each other." Unpopular opinion, I don't think Sabrina is the best shooter in the WNBA, but like she
Yeah, I've
definitely is
heard
the
a
most
lot of that.
marketable.
Like,
So,
yeah.
and she had the 3-point shootout performance. Like the thing is, I mean, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but I think it's just a good idea to have a player with her marketability, with her star power on that stage because people know who she is. Like guys in the NBA wear her shoes. She's not an
Yeah.
unknown. And to have this opportunity on a big night, NBA Saturday, I think is really good for the league.
Yeah, it's I think the part that you mentioned about Steph marketing this since July and being involved with this, and sounds like legitimately excited to do
Yeah,
this,
he
right?
wants to do it.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think you mentioned Sabrina's marketability in her shoes and all of that stuff. I think a lot of NBA guys like just really like her game,
Hmm.
like she's got that kind of game that translates to NBA player love, you know.
Hmm.
Um and I think this is going to do numbers. Like this
Yeah,
is
I
going
hope
to
so.
I bet you, like, I'm really curious. I know that it's kind of taboo to mention ratings for some reason as it pertains to the NBA, but I do think that event is probably going to rate pretty damn high. Um like even higher, I think, than most normal All-Star Saturdays or whatever. And that actually kind of brings me to the next little thing that I wanted to ask you about. We saw a an NBA game go head to head with a college. Now it was a better matchup in the on the call the women's
Wasn't it a
college
good
side.
NBA game? Like, weren't the Celtics involved or the Nuggets or something?
I think it was, yeah, it was like a marquee matchup, but it wasn't like former champion in the way that it
Got it.
was on that side. Although if the Nuggets were, then it would have actually been.
Wasn't it
But yeah,
Celtics Heat, or am I mistaken that?
it was during rivalry week. So
Yeah,
it,
I
it
think it was
was
Celtics
probably a
Heat.
good,
Yeah.
yeah. And you had a higher number come back from the college women's game than the NBA game. And as somebody who has been saying here, like, guys, the league isn't as healthy as they are telling us that it is. Like, I promise, Mark Cuban doesn't just sell his team and sell off a portion of his identity because it's a decision that he makes lightly. And that was another kind of like wow moment, not just from the standpoint of like, wow, the NBA got leapfrogged in that spot, but also another, like, I feel like all of the progress that has been made with women's basketball has been like painstakingly made, where every single like step along the path, you're like, see, yes, see, so you had both of those things going on. But like, for like, when you saw that news cross your desk, how'd you take that?
What's interesting is I feel like the pace of women's basketball growth has just exponentially increased in the last 2 years. Um,
Yeah,
it's it seems as though we're getting a new attendance record every week. We're looking at, obviously a lot of this is the Caitlin Clark effect. She sells out arenas all across the country. A number of schools have set their attendance records in games where she has come to visit. But,
yeah,
you know, South Carolina is averaging more attendance than any team since 1998 Tennessee, which was one of the all-time great women's basketball teams. And, you know, like Ohio State just set an attendance record, Northern Iowa set an attendance record, Colorado, UCLA, USC, like all of these places around the country that aren't just being visited by Caitlin Clark are all setting attendance records. And I do think that those go hand in hand, right? Like people wanting to watch in person, people wanting to watch on TV, because it's really embarrassing to broadcast a TV product when nobody's in the stands, right? Like nobody wants to
yeah,
watch that on television. It's
yeah,
just doesn't not fun to watch. But after getting that national title game, which was almost 10 million, watching that game, Iowa LSU, it does seem like there's just been steady progress every week. And, we started the season off with this marquee Iowa Virginia Tech game on a Thursday, like against NFL, and it did like 600K. So when we look at just the growth from November until now, like every Thursday, we've seen a little bit of an uptick in those marquee games. And to get to a point where LSU, South Carolina was about 1.6, I think, just a little bit more than that NBA game. It doesn't really surprise me because I feel like we've seen the markers, you know, the incremental attendance growth just happening over the last 2 years. I was surprised by the NBA number. That's not a lie. Like I didn't realize
yeah,
that we were in that consideration yet, because like I know NBA doesn't like talking about ratings. Like obviously college basketball, we love talking about ratings. It's a very big deal right now.
yeah,
But yeah, I'm not surprised at all that uh, the women are hitting these heights, because I do think that there's something about college basketball that just people, like college sports, like fans intrinsically, latch onto, because there's something that you can root for your team and there's a certain continuity, and that's lacking with like free agency and all of the diva-ness of professional sports. And I understand why people have just been wanting a college product to hold on to. And the fact that ESPN is so very committed to women's college basketball, I think is obviously a big factor in this. I realize I should be commenting on the NBA part of this. I Aaron talks about this all the time. When Steph is playing, when LeBron's playing, that's all that matters for the NBA. And I'm really concerned about what that looks like when Steph and LeBron are no longer playing. Because like they have these Saturday NBA showcases. It's basically just Warriors, Lakers, or Warriors versus Lakers for 6 straight weeks.
Yeah.
And those are going to do numbers, but are any other games going to do numbers? Like I really don't know. Like Jason Tatum is the number 2 selling jersey in America. He plays for a team that is the odds-on favorite to win the title, that has made multiple straight conference finals, was in the finals 2 years ago. Why can't he get eyes on television? That's so weird to me. Like the NBA is doing something wrong.
Well, I big long checklist rolls out from what I'm holding, but no, I think you kind of touched on the excitement to that matchup, right? Was it LSU South Carolina was the matchup? And you watch that game and you hear the crowd and it's just like a legitimate pop, like multiple times over the course of and you feel it like emanating from the court where these possessions actually matter. This game actually matters. And no, like both, both those teams are going to be playing in March Madness, and it's not like just like in the NBA, you don't like you don't have to live and die on every possession in the NBA, but those girls were, and you watch the NFL and those guys do live and die on every possession over the course of an NFL week, over an NFL game, college football too. The problem that the NBA and MLB especially is really having is that like, you can really feel it. You can really feel it coming off of the court or the field. Like, we play 81 more of these things, whatever, and I, we just saw the NBA today announce that they're going to split up the draft into 2 different days. You know what the rating is going to be on the second day?
Oh my God. 4 minutes between second round picks is going to be hellacious.
And they're gonna try to fill it with all like Woj is gonna be sitting there talking about all of the potential deals that you're gonna be making with second round, draft capital and stuff like that. And so like that is going to wind up being like what gets sold or whatever. But what the NBA keeps on doubling and tripling down on is quantity versus quality.
Yeah.
And what we keep on finding out is that actually quality of the events is actually way more important than the number of those events. And I know that,
proving that to themselves too, because the play-in is what's getting interest, and the play-in is 2-3 games, right? And the in-season tournament, which was 4 games and then a knockout round, was getting interest. So you are proving that the scarcity of those games is what draws interest, and yet just adding more and more nonsense.
Gonna keep on throwing stuff, which and I thought that was a fascinating look into what drives eyeballs now. That was a legitimate event. And you said that ESPN is very invested in women's college basketball or college basketball, whatever. They're pretty invested in the NBA too. They're a big partner with the NBA too. And I think that, that was a pretty perfect kind of capsule of where these sports are kind of heading and why they are heading there. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about, if it isn't too painful, is about the Sparks. And you tweeted out something the other day that made me laugh out loud when I saw it. It was like when Ramona Shelburne tweets about the Sparks, it is terrible news.
Every time.
So NECA is no longer on the Sparks. It is like the carrot to all of this that maybe the Sparks will be in position to draft Caitlin Clark. Like, is that it?
No, so the WNBA draft lottery already happened. They did not get the number 1 pick, and that will be going to Indiana. So Caitlin Clark will most likely be going to Indiana. The Sparks did get the number 2 pick, so I do think that they can get a legitimate franchise-altering player at number 2. that could be a front court player from Stanford, actually, which is a nice little segue from Nneka Ogwumike departing from the Sparks. But I mean, really, this all goes back to Derek Fisher and the absolute just fire that he lit across the Sparks franchise over 4 years that resulted in Candace Parker leaving, Chelsea Gray leaving. This organization becoming a laughing stock among the rest of the league because he, like his counterparts on the Lakers, believed in a slimmed down front office where very few people had accountability. And it was
works
just
so
him.
great.
Yeah, really. You got to love when there's not enough people doing the work. But yeah, Nneka was like the last vestige of the 2016 team that won the WNBA title. And I think it's good for her, personally. She's been on a lottery team the last 3 years and she's turning 34. Like, this is the time where you've proven what you need to in Los Angeles. You're going to be getting your jersey retired here. You won a title, you won an MVP. Find a better winning situation now. It's not happening in LA this upcoming season. Like, the free agency class is just not good enough for the Sparks to turn into a contender immediately. So I think, obviously, if you're the Sparks, you don't want to lose your franchise icon. That's not a good thing. You'd hope that she would play out the rest of her career in purple and gold, but it gives them a little bit more flexibility to really commit to rebuilding, which they've kind of just been like dipping their toes into the last couple of years. And like, it's hard to just rip the Band-Aid off, but Nneka kind of did it for them. And by Nneka leaving, now you no longer have to give a roster spot to her sister Jeanie, who, God bless her, just has not been healthy enough to be on the court the last 4 years in LA. So, you get a little more flexibility there, a little more financial flexibility. Presuming you draft Cameron Brink from Stanford, like, she can immediately step into a starting spot if Nneka's not there. It kind of allows you to take on some picks for, dead money, like all of the stuff that rebuilding teams are supposed to do, but it's harder to justify when you're employing an all WNBA player, Nneka Ogwumike. So as much as I hate it, that like she's not going to be a Spark forever, I understand the logic on her side. And I do think that it opens up some more possibilities for the Sparks, who were not going to be good this year. And they're playing in Long Beach for the first 5 games of the season instead of Staples Center because of some renovation nonsense. I am not going to be going to those games in Long Beach. I don't support going to Long Beach, but hopefully this is just a chapter we can end quickly and get on to better things next year.
But we are going to be in a spot like we were last year, right? Or the last couple of years, where Candace Parker is lighting the world on fire still for Chicago or something like that.
Yeah, it's great that Candace Parker and Chelsea Gray have won a combined 4 championships since they left Los Angeles. Really, it's not that they weren't capable of doing it, So, good for them.
But they had that big 3 then, right? Of Nneka, Candace, and Chelsea, and those 3, legends.
Yes.
Leave. Did they get draft capital to
all free agents
in return for it?
All unrestricted free agents, yeah. I had the assistant GM of the Sparks tell me that the best contract signed in the WNBA in the summer of 2020 was Chelsea Gray's contract, because can you believe we got a point guard of her talent for less than the max? I was like, you signed her for 1 year. She already took meetings with Vegas this offseason. She's gone. Like, this is just I have to fill out the terms of my restricted free agency. No, they all left for nothing. It's wonderful, really. Candace went to Chicago, won a title there. Chelsea went to Vegas. She won a title there. Then they combined in Vegas, won a title last year. Nneka goes to Vegas. I can't. I just can't.
Well, this has been, I would say, fun.
Sure. We should have ended on college basketball. It's a much more optimistic thing to talk about.
We can end on the Dodgers. We could talk about the Dodgers for like a second. Just think of
Dodgers.
like spring training.
They're having a Matt Kemp bobblehead night. I'm very excited. I'm going to try to be in attendance for that one. I
was so thrilled with the way that him going back to the Dodgers worked out. Like, that he looked good again and all that stuff. He's one of my favorites. You are one of my favorites, Sabrina. Thank you very much for hopping on. And thank you for your internet hanging on for the entirety of the conversation. That's also an important aspect.
Last time it was not just my internet; it was a whole situation.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you to your power for hanging on tight there. Again, you can check out her work at The Athletic. You got to check out her show, the Athletic Women's Basketball Show, and follow her on Twitter at Sabrina JM. where she is legitimately breaking news. That was like a really cool, proud moment that I got to watch from our vantage point here, and keep doing that great work there, Sabrina. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony.